So we come to Jung's model of the mind. In the center is the self. The self is the regulator, coordinator of the entire psychic apparatus. He is like the traffic police who controls traffic in all directions. So self is the regulator. The self is surrounded by the collective unconscious, which are populated. That space of collective unconscious is populated by what is called archetypes. Now, this collective unconscious is a new idea. It has two words, unconscious and collective, meaning this part of the psyche is unconscious, number one. And number two, it is collective, it is not personal. Whereas the unconscious outside of collective unconscious is the personal unconscious. So you can see here the personal unconscious, this space is the personal unconscious. Whereas this space outside of the self and before the personal unconscious is the collective unconscious. This whole space. And you see archetypes here, number one, number two, number three, number four. Many other archetypes will be there. Now it is collective in the sense that every member of our species has it. It is inborn. It is not created in the experience of a person, and there is nothing personal about it. That it is collective, that we share it across the species. And another way of looking at it would be, we'll come to it in a moment. So this is collective. And the moment you say collective, it is not personal, it means it is transpersonal. So in a way, it's a beginning of transpersonal psychology. So there is a whole area of psychology which is called transpersonal psychology. And you have the individual psychology, the transpersonal, and the parapsychology. And there's a lot of confluence between transpersonal psychology and parapsychology. In fact, many people say they are the same, but many people say they are different. Like Jung would say they are different, that this is a transpersonal model. Now, how do we wrap around our minds around the concept of something transpersonal? Because that is something difficult to grasp. That what I have not experienced and is strictly not mine, how is that a part of me? It is like saying, what is in me but not mine? Yeah, please.
So, will the collective unconscious, the composition will be different among different races, or the areas that are separated geographically for thousands of years?
It will be varied across every individual.
Uh-huh.
It will be like,
But still it is collective.
Correct. Collective but varied.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all have fingerprints, but different fingerprints. We all have genetic code, but slightly different genetic code. We may have 99% same, but there is some difference. So they are common, but variable. And this, what I say, range limited infinity is something which is common to many of our concepts. That you can have a variable which can take infinite values, but within a range. Like, for example, say the height of a man. Now, you can have a short man who is extremely short and a tall man extremely tall, but nobody is going to have a height of 10 kilometers. You will never have a situation where you are flying in the plane, you open the window and you see somebody's face. Similarly, you are not going to have a man of 2 millimeters. So what we have is, there is an infinite variety, but a range-bound infinity. That there is an upper layer, there is a lower layer, and between that there is infinite variation. So what we have is a phenomena called range-bound infinity. So that range-bound infinity will be there here also. That while all of us have anger, the way it is in quantum and in qualitative sense is different. Like we all share all the basic affects. So we all have aggression, we all have sexuality, we all have envy. We all have greed, but the quantum of it, how much of it is controlled by ego or superego, and in what context, how does it come out, that differs from person to person. So it is like something shared by everyone, and yet everyone being distinct in the way they share it. So
But
we are
still,
dealing
the
with the,
common areas will be different in different races that have been separate. The cultures
correct.
will will the conscious be different, collective unconscious.
Yes, it will be different. The answer is definitive yes. And the
Mhm.
definitive yes leads to controversy around you. Because if the collective unconscious is different across races, it can easily lead to a political racial argument that some races
Yes.
are superior to others. And in fact, that is something that many people feel diffident about this concept. And in fact, if you look at Jung's analysis of the causation of Second World War, he talks about the old collective unconscious of the Jew and the young collective unconscious of the German. And the old one has matured, mellowed down, softened itself out, but the young is still rearing to go. It has still that teenage hormones of a young race. And the Titanic archetype in the German psyche has overtaken its ego and its moral complex. That was his explanation of the Second World War. So once you take this micro to the macro, it will lead to a lot of controversies. But what you are saying, within the Jungian framework, the answer is definitive yes. That there will be a difference in the collective unconscious of East and West, of older races and newer races, of civilizational nations and nations just born recently in history.
And the crystallizations into different, say, symbols or imageries or thoughts, will they comprise? Will they constitute the archetypes?
Yes, the
Mhm.
manifestation of the archetypes in the
Mhm.
collective unconscious will
Mhm.
lead to different types of mythologies.
Mhm.
And the important point here is that most races across the world, including tribes which have never come in contact with modern world, there is sharing usually of a positive end to mythological stories. But there are some races, and this is strictly Jungian, not mine. He includes extreme north countries, like one is Germany and includes one or two countries more. I think Norway, but I am not very sure. But it includes those extreme polar countries where the mythology is that towards the end of the story, there is an apocalypse and some titan who destroys everything. So the stories don't end with a happy ending, but they end with a destruction, which is a very unique kind of mythology. And this he attributes to the contents in the collective unconscious. You can actually even look at the Western interpretation of Oedipus and the Indian interpretation of Oedipus. Sudhir Kakkar has done a lot of thinking on this part. That in the West, the story is that that Oedipus kills his father, takes the mother and takes the throne. In India, the Oedipus is castrated by the father. His mother and he plead with the father to resuscitate him. And the father, in his benign egalitarianism, resuscitates him and bestows him with a boon. But Oedipus never takes the throne of the father. Similarly, the, the myth of Mahavidyas, thus Mahavidyas,
Yes.
they are like extremely intense forms of goddesses, but benevolent. Very intense, like they are shown with having cut heads of 3 people, drinking blood, having all the brutal instruments in their hands, but they are worshipped as benign. And Jung says this ambivalence is the sign of great maturity, which the East has, whereas the Western psyche is fundamentally fractured. It is in a split open condition between the God and the devil. It's not able to close the split and reach ambivalence. So when you get into that kind of discussion on a macro scale, no doubt it becomes controversial.
Yes, sir.
Any other question? So this psyche, this model, this machinery is in fact an instrument for a greater concept which Jung talks about, calls the program of life. So Jung's model of the mind is based upon certain areas of knowledge, and we'll tap them one by one and then come back to the model. The first philosophical premise Jung taps while he constructs the model of the mind is the concept of tabul rasa. The concept of tabul rasa means, in philosophy, that the mind is blank when you are born, and in experience, everything is created in the mind. So we start with a plain sheet, and experience writes on that plain sheets to create structural and functional templates. That's the principle of tabul rasa. Opposite to that in philosophy is the concept of design in nature. That there is an inborn design in nature. So there is an inborn design in the physical nature, in the living nature, and also in the mind. And that mind is not a blank sheet, but we already come with a preformed structures which only develop or activate in interaction with environment. So we come with the genes. The expression may need an environment, but the genes are already there. And the genes have specific characteristics. So Jung does not believe in the tabul rasa philosophy. He believes in the design in nature philosophy. So that is one pillar on which his model of the mind stands, that he believes in design in nature. That
And then whose idea is tabul rasa?
Tabul rasa is, it goes before Immanuel Kant, David Hume. David Hume, and there is a line of thinkers before Immanuel Kant who believed that the mind is blank at birth. But Immanuel Kant was very clear, not clear, but he was very emphatic. The mind is structured. We don't get all the jigsaw puzzles in a package and we make the mind. The mind already comes pre-made. It may be ready to cook, but it is still pre-made. We don't get raw ingredients to make what we want. So, one input into his model of the mind is he believes in design of nature. Second, he believes what he sees, that the seed contains the blueprint of the plant. It never happens that a mango seed will give you an orange plant. The seed contains the blueprint of the plant. And similarly, there must be something in the psyche which contains the blueprint of the development of the psyche. Just as the biological blueprint is there in the genes, there should be something either in the genes or somewhere else. But you cannot have a situation where the body has a blueprint, but the mind does not have blueprint. As though the mind is a divorced system disjointed from the body. Because this is one system. And if this whole one system has a blueprint, it cannot happen that some part will have a blueprint and some part will not have a blueprint. And we see, even in case of, say, black people in America, even after so many generations, they are still the skin color, the bodies, they are still reflecting the same thing. The genes are speaking. Now, you may use it for a racial argument, that's a different game altogether. But strictly from a scientific point of view, the observation is very clear that despite living in a cold climate for centuries, the genes are still expressing themselves as they were centuries back, and the environment is not having any effect unless there is a real crossbreeding. Then we see the hybridization of the race. But the genes are expressing. Our faces are like our parents many times. And this is completely by design, not by our will. Nobody says next Monday I should have a face like this. It just happens to be that way. So these are the arguments for design in nature. And that we find even in hereditary diseases that we see. So one part is design in nature. Second element is the blueprint part, that the seed has the blueprint of the tree, and therefore there must be something in the human beings which has a blueprint of its life, because we see human life passing through very distinct phases in a very orderly way, that you have a childhood, you have a playing age, you have a teen age, you have a young age, you are mature age, old age, and death. It never happens that somebody has old age first and the young age later, or the young age is only of 2 years and the old age of 35 years. We see a very clear predictability, a very clear order and transition, a chronology to our stages of life. And that cannot happen unless there is a blueprint. Otherwise, we are talking about a festival of coincidences, an unending festival of coincidence, which cannot happen. It cannot happen for millions of years that this design is followed by its own just as a coincidence. And therefore, Jung says that there is a design of our life. And the design of our life he calls the program of life. And if there is a program of life, then the whole system, which is supposed to undergo a program of life, must have structures inside of it which regulate this program of life. And that would mean a biological regulating structure and a psychological regulating structure. And obviously, both of them will be in connection to each other, or maybe they are the same, we don't know. But the psychological component, if we take to be the model of the mind, metaphorically, till we get empirical knowledge, the best we have is metaphorical knowledge, which is in front of us, the model of the mind. Then what we have is that the mind, there must be a coordinator in the mind, which coordinates this whole mind so that it operates in a distinct way in childhood, in young age, in mid-age, in old age, and so on. We can also see that in terms of our decades of life. Like the first decade is more towards play. The second decade is more towards finding an identity for oneself. The 20s is more for sensuality and sexuality. 30s, the focus automatically shifts to profession and social achievements, making money and power and so on. 40s, it shifts to social respect and contributing to society. 50s, it shifts largely to contributing to society. And we see that in consumer behavior also, that majority of buying happens between 15 to 35. After 35, you start liking by and large what you were liking in your childhood. This whole brand effect goes away. You are no longer conscious which brand you are wearing and what others are wearing. So we see a very distinct kind of operation of the mind across decades. And Jung refers to all of this as the program of life. That this is not happening randomly. This is happening because organically there is a change from inside. Another way to look at it is, look at young age beginning and ending. So puberty will be the start of the young age and menopause will be the end of the young age. And with that, lot of things in the mind change, especially as a customer or as you go around in society, a lot of things change. So Jung says that there must be a structure which is coordinating the psyche to be congruent with this program of life. And how does he build that into the model of the mind? The self is the coordinator. And what is it coordinating? It is coordinating the activation and deactivation of the archetypes. Now, this is very important. So what are the archetypes? They are contents of the collective unconscious. Now, what are they? They are the eternal representatives of the roles that we play in society. They are the seeds of the program of life. For example, what are the archetypes? The first series of archetypes are biologically driven. For example, the archetype of the child, the archetype of the mother, the archetype of the father. Now, what are these archetypes? These are centers in the psyche, which are repositories of knowledge, as well as they are the points which lead to affect and cognition. So I'll repeat again. Archetypes are structural components found in the collective unconscious. Is it clear? This is a very difficult idea of Jung. We may have to repeat it next time. Because in the entire model of the mind and the Jungian theory, one of the complicated parts is the archetype. So Jung says that there are archetypes related to all the roles we have to play in our life. Now, what are these roles? We are born, we are neonatal, we are children. So the child archetype, the mother archetype, the father archetype, the grandfather archetype. These are archetypes which correspond to the biological roles we are going to play in life, in our program of life. Now, what are the other roles? There are social roles we are going to play. For example, in the teenage years, the parents look after us, they fulfill our desires, and we go out to explore without any concern for the economics of the house. So it is the prince who is going out to find a princess. So the prince archetype, the father in a way is the king of the house, the king archetype. There is a king out there in society, and there is a king archetype inside. Then you pursue a profession. So you go out to find money for your family and yourself. This is the function of the hunter. So the natural archetype is the hunter. That finds expression today in becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a chartered accountant. But what is inside is you are in the hunter-gatherer phase. So when you reach that age, this archetype has to activate. If it does not activate and you remain a dependent child, it creates a problem. So there has to be an age-appropriate activation and deactivation of archetypes. There has to be a calibrated activation and deactivation. For example, there is a predator archetype. Because we grew up in the jungle where the first thing we wanted to do was to save ourselves from the predator. Because everyone is food for someone else. So we have to save ourselves from the one of whom we are the food. So that the cat saves itself from the dog, the rat saves itself from the cat, and there is a built-in predator archetype which activates. So the moment the rat sees the cat, it runs. Every animal runs away from its predator. Jung would describe the phenomena to say, the moment the sight of the predator happens, the predator archetype activates, and that in turn activates a series of cognitive and affective events in the mind, which leads to the action of flight. But if this predator archetype, which is very functional, which is necessary for survival, if it overactivates in the modern day city environment, you have paranoia. So paranoia will be irrational overactivation of the predator archetype, that somebody is coming after me. So his idea of paranoia will be overactivation, improper activation of the predator archetype.
So, but in the predator archetype, we would imagine that the person is actively finding a prey to hunt upon.
Right? He's saving
Where
himself. He's saving himself from the predator. When he's finding food, he is activating the hunter archetype.
predator and hunter are not the same.
Predator is one who comes after us. And when, yeah, so you are right. When we go after somebody, we are a predator.
Yeah.
But that is designated in the model as the hunter archetype.
Okay, sir.
You are right. There is a verbal problem. So within this framework, we will keep it that way. That when we go out as predators, we call the hunter archetype activation. And when we are saving ourselves from somebody coming after us, we will designate that as predator.
Predator. Okay.
So the self, by activating and deactivating archetypes, leads to series of thoughts and affects and action which help us to live out in accordance with our program of life, part of which is naturally ordained, part of which is socially ordained, and part of which is ordained by our circumstances, and part of which is our choice. All of them come together. Now, because of our experience of the world, there are personal unconscious fantasies and fears which are also trapped in the personal unconscious. That is also there. So both of them are active, the collective and the personal. And the ego is outside. Now the ego is adapting oneself for the external world. Okay? So the ego outside of this conscious mind is the environment. And the ego is adapting the inside to the outside. But the way ego does it is very important. If the ego starts adapting to the outside, taking material only from the outside, we become uprooted from our inside. But if the ego maintains the inside also, while adapting to the outside, it's a healthy state to be in. So this is represented by what is called the ego-self axis. How strongly is the ego connected to the self? If the ego is strongly connected, if this ego-self axis is strong, and this in Jungian therapy is one of the core elements to be focused upon, the strengthening of the ego-self axis. That then we will not feel uprooted, listless. In Winnicott's language, we will not be living our false self created from environment, but we'll be living our true self, which substantially is created from inside, and a minority component comes from outside for adaptation. So this is Jung's model of the mind. I have just introduced it. What we will do is next time we will go deeper into it, with starting with the definition of archetypes. What are the types of archetypes? How they are represented in mythology? How does the mind ordinarily function? And how in pathology we can use this model of the mind. And then we'll go into other concepts, but we will spend some more time next time on model of the mind. So Jung will take about 3 to 4 sessions. Yeah.
Sir, is the self as described by Jung the same as is described in currently prevalent general psychology?
No.
Personality psychology, or is it different?
Very different.
Very different.
So, if you go on my YouTube channel, you will find a complete video. It's almost 1 hour video on self, the way the word self has been used in psychoanalysis. I'm not talking about psychology outside of psychoanalysis. There are 10 different definitions of there, but within psychoanalysis itself, Jung's self is different from Kohut's self, is different from Winnicott's self. Like for Kohut, self is almost like the sum total, the functional active sum total of the psyche as far as pathology is concerned. That is the kind of Kohut's self. And Kohut's self is not inborn. It is created in experience with the world, and the self can become a healthy self or an unhealthy self. And if it becomes an unhealthy self, it can become narcissistic, borderline, or psychotic. That is Kohut's way of dealing with the word self. Very different from Winnicott. Winnicott talks about the false self and the true self. The true is the authentic inside, and false is something disjointed from the authentic inside, put up to please the outside. And both of them are different from Jung's idea of the self, because Jung's self is inborn, it is structural, and it is central to the working of the psyche, none of which is there in Kohut or Winnicott. So their selves are created in experience with the environment, and they are functional. They are not structural. This is structural. Second, Kohut's Winnicott's self is directly experienced. Like in therapy, if you are using Winnicott's concepts, you talk to the patient by saying that, why have you put up this false front? Let us go to the true part of you. Let's put aside the pretense you have put up for everyone else. Let us put aside the performance and look at the truth. But in Jung, the self cannot be experienced. So Jungian therapist will never say, let us look at yourself, because it cannot be experienced. By definition, Jung has put up in a way that the self cannot be experienced directly, but its after effects can be known. Its working can be felt. So on this point, although his idea of self and Kohut's idea of self are very different, on one point they are together, that Kohut also says the self cannot be directly experienced, but his self is not the same as Jung's self. So they are talking in different frameworks. And one thing common is, in Kohut or Winnicott, it is definitely not structural, in the sense of being inborn. Like in Winnicott, it's purely functional. In Kohut, it is partly structural. I should not say it's not structural. It is partly structural, but created in experience with the environment. In Jung, there are two conditions. One, it is completely structural, and it is inborn, and it coordinates the whole psyche, which partly you will also find in Winnicott and Kohut, that their idea of self also, in a way, it's their selves are not coordinating selves, but the way they operate, they predominate over the functioning of the psyche.
It is very interesting to see that ego self axis is very important concept when self is such an abstract and evanescent concept, which means the ego has a lot of work to do and also has a lot of flexibility.
Correct. Now, the moment you shift from west to east, the self becomes knowable, experienceable, because then we are coming to either the idea of soul or the idea of, in Sri Aurobindo's system, we will come to the idea of the psychic. And that is experienceable. That is also governing the whole system, but it's experienceable, not to everyone. The experience of it is a rare experience. It's not for everybody. And it's not something we can do on demand, but it's possible.
Yes.
Contrast to Jung, where it is just kept out of the realm of the knowable. And yes, one point before I forget, before we close for the day, some Jungian thinkers, they don't depict the model like this. What they do is, they put self in the center, and they also put self here, around. They talk of a self which is dispersed. And then you have the environment outside. But this is the model that I like. It explains it very well. And this you will find in a book by Anthony Stevens. So Jung is the last person you should read on Jung directly. You should read Anthony Stevens first and then take up the originals. So this is from Anthony Stevens.
Okay, sir.
Fine. So with the introduction to the Jung's model of the mind, we close for the day. Yeah,
Yes.
please. Neha.
So I just wanted to check if the link for next Wednesday would be the same.
No, it will not be the same.
Is there a way to get it? Would you be sending it to Dr. Meenakshi again, or should we be in touch with you directly about this?
Just send a hi to me directly. I will add you to the group.
Okay, I don't have your details, sir. So is that possible to get your number or something like that?
Yeah, please note down. 98981
Yeah.
68
Okay.
410.
So it's 98981 68410.
Right. Just send me a hi. So what I'll do is I'll add you to the group.
Okay.
So the Jungian part we can go on.
Thank you.
So yeah, Shalini.
Do we have time for questions? Otherwise, I can keep it for the other
Go
session.
on. I'm all free. Go on.
Okay. So, in the structure that you have presented, I'm keen to know the Freudian and the neo-Freudian understanding of defense mechanisms. If we try and locate it within this structure and the Jungian framework, where would you situate it? Would it be part of the personal, or does it also have some location in the collective unconscious, the concept of defense mechanisms?
What will happen is that in the collective unconscious, you will have the moral complex, and that will work both in the collective unconscious and the personal unconscious.
It seems the Jungian framework has just given an umbrella term called moral complex, whereas the Freudians have gone into details and separated out different kinds of defense mechanisms.
Hey, the defense mechanism Jung does not have a problem with.
But where does it reflect in his model?
Yeah. So the way the defense mechanisms operate, they are operated by the ego and the superego. The defense mechanism will have to operate in the collective unconscious as well as in the personal unconscious.
Okay. So it's within that ego self axis.
Yeah. So there will be two parts. Let us say you take this square. Let us say this square is the moral complex, right? The Freudian equivalent of superego. So here you have the ego, here you have the superego, right? And both of them will be operating on the contents which are here, which are content in the personal unconscious, collective unconscious. This will have an action, this will have an action.
Okay.
And all the mechanisms will be used by both. Jung does not take issue with Freud on the issue of defense mechanisms. Otherwise, he has all the things different. Like the model of the mind is different, dream analysis is different, typology is different, pathogenesis is different, healing is different. But defense mechanism, he does not take an issue with.
Okay. The other question I had was with regard to Thanatos. And I was just trying to understand if Jung has any ideas around suicide in particular. How does he view it?
So there the idea is of one of the archetypes is the archetypes of dissolution and death here. Just say there is a birth and child, there is an old wise man, and after old wise man is death. So that also is a part of cycle, and that activation and deactivation of it will lead to the idea of Thanatos. That if it activates without being age appropriate, that will be the action of Thanatos. But Jung does not have a concept of death instinct in the sense Freud is.
Okay, so this model doesn't capture that, but then would it be then closer to what the Indian or the Eastern concept looks at? Maybe my understanding is a little limited here, but destruction from the Shiva aspect of the Trinity. Would that?
Correct. So when we talk of the archetypes and when we go into the mythological archetypes, there will be archetypes of destruction.
Okay, got it. That explains.
So every culture will have an archetype of destruction. Because in any theory, the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh have to be factored in some way. Because any process will have a starting, maintenance, and termination. So when we look at Thanatos, then the destruction component is there. And there is an implicit idea of unison. Okay, there may be that from where it all comes, there all goes. There can be an idea of unison. But the idea of unison is different because unlike Freud, the component which is missing of Thanatos here is of inertia. Because one of the core components of Freud's Thanatos is inertia. That component is not here. The destruction component is there. By a stretch of concepts, masochism also can be explained. By resorting to some other concept, destruction can separately be explained, not as part of one archetype. They can be, but inertia is something which is in a way alien to this. The only parallel to inertia is unison, that ultimately everything goes back to the source. That idea is near to it, but it's actually not it. Inertia actually is missing in one sense.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Okay. So see you then next time.